All right, welcome back to Living Fit's 2-Minute Tuesdays. Hope everyone's had a great start to the week. Let's get straight into this week's question, which comes from Lee, who asked, it's quite an interesting question actually, what is the one modality in health and fitness that I wish I had started earlier or incorporated earlier? So let's put 2 minutes on the clock, and this one's quite an easy one. So, all right, so what's the one modality that I wish I had incorporated earlier myself or in my clients? I've always incorporated this modality with clients to some extent, but it's something that I've probably neglected myself, especially early on in my career, early on in my training, and that's stretching. I think if you ask any strength and conditioning coach, any personal trainer, any health practitioner, basically, especially as they get on in their own development, what they have not utilized enough, and I'm pretty sure they'll tell you flexibility and stretching. Now, flexibility is actually the number one biomotor ability that we lose first. So your muscles own elasticity. This is why injuries tend to be higher in as we age, and we get injured easier. Now, this comes down to collagen, elastic fibers in muscle tissues, and not having that rebound or that flexibility and stretch in them. In other words, they're just not as I guess malleable would be a half decent word to use. So the good thing about stretching in terms of therapeutic, it's also very relaxing. So one of the number one things that I do myself, and something that I recommend to all my clients, especially if they have trouble sleeping, is I get them to stretch before bed. Because usually when they're stretching before bed, they're focusing on the stretching, so they're not worried about all the 100 million thoughts that are going through their mind. But also, stretching is also very relaxing on the mind and the body. And by stretching before bed, you can also incorporate it into your bedtime routine. And I think a lot of people who have trouble winding down and getting deep restorative sleep at night don't have that wind down routine in place. They're watching TV till basically the minute before they go to bed, or they're on the computer or other electronic devices. Stretching will help give you something to do right before bed. Now, I'm not a big proponent of stretching before exercise, purely because this will limit the amount of power output, and also you're changing length-tension relationships in the body before you put the body into an environment that might need that balance and alignment the way you naturally are. Now, a good example of this is if you watch a cat sleeping, they're normally in a ball, and then because they curl up in a ball, the first thing they do is they sort of arch their back, because they're basically undoing all the work of being curled in a ball. And that's just natural. The same thing happens when people wake up in the morning. If they sleep in sort of like this fetal position, the first thing they do is stretch, arms up, etc. But I'm not a big proponent of stretching before exercise unless it's corrective in nature or I'm trying to inhibit a muscle. Now, when I say inhibit a muscle, if I have someone who has an easily facilitated pec muscle, so they usually have rounded shoulders, I will stretch the pec muscle out before doing any rowing work or any back exercise, because that pec muscle is easily facilitated, quite often it can start being falsely recruited for exercises it's not designed for. So that's generally the only time I would incorporate some sort of stretching before exercise. Now you say, well, what would you normally do before exercise then? Normally I'm doing a dynamic warm-up. So I'm basically doing a warm-up with the same sort of exercises that I'm about to do in that session. So if I'm doing a squat session, I will warm up by doing squatting. It just makes sense, doesn't it? So, of course, as we get older, the warm-ups tend to be longer and longer. Quite often my warm-ups go longer than my actual sessions, which is something to look forward to. All right, so number one proponent that I would recommend to anyone who's starting their journey in exercise or just wants to have the best bang for their buck in terms of longevity, the first biomotor ability that we lose is flexibility. So I recommend staying on top of that as much as you can, not only for its training outcomes, but also for the benefits of longevity, injury prevention, helping you wind down before sleep, etc. I hope this has helped. I hope you got a lot out of this. 2-Minute Tuesdays done and dusted. If you enjoyed the content, like the video, like the page, share with someone who you think might benefit from this, and we'll see you next week for 2-Minute Tuesdays. Thank you.